Good morning.
Hello, Peter.
I just love that wall of books.
What's that?
I love that wall of books.
Books are good. So Mark's saying he's going to be in for the first hour. Oh, he's got a wedding anniversary. Ooh.
I'm going to have to leave after the first hour to drive my mother to the ophthalmologist.
Okay. I had an interesting meeting today. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I'm going to put us on recording mute for a bit because what I'm about to tell you. Back to recording. I just wanted to mention I've pimped this book quite a few times, The Language versus Reality. But it has this one, but it has a really nice little example in here of something that I think is very core to a lot of what we talk about. It's something called Schelling's game. And one of the things is, imagine you are a parachutist and you have been given only this map. And you are landing with someone else, and you know that the other person's landed at location Y, and you somewhere on location Y, and you are at location X. You have no means to communicate. Where should you meet to liaise with this person?
Bridge.
Yes. So the reason that is actually really important is there are many questions like this. One of them is a social game where they say, here's a stack of money, divide it in a way that the person in the other room divides the same amount of money. If you divide it the same way, you both get $100. Over 90% of people will divide it 50-50. So there are all these ways we can coordinate without actually having to communicate. But then it gets interesting for us. And that is, sorry, I didn't have pens when I was sitting outside. So they're talking about, the reason you said bridge is because there's only one bridge. It's kind of in the middle. So it becomes a coordinating device, right? You coordinate around the bridge. So what this guy's main premise is that words are coordination devices. And he makes the point that language has evolved just enough to get useful coordination done. And I think that's such a refreshing and fantastic perspective, because so many people in our field are all about knowledge graph in the sense that one word means one thing almost. And here it makes the point that a lot of our communication is so heavily context dependent. And you have to decide how you go, what you're going to orient around and how you're going to coordinate. Anyway, just wanted to highlight it. Now we can coordinate around Mark's chair. Language versus reality. Friday was very, very good. Fabian, thank you for making it happen. I look forward to having it transcribed. Fabian is being so quiet. Alan is being semi-quiet.
What can someone summarize the main takeaways, or the biggest revelations?
I would have problems doing that, but once we get the transcript, we'll do the usual of doing a few boldings from the discussion to make it easy to skim. But it was it was provocative of a way of tearing down barriers is one kind of teasing way, I would say. What would you say, Fabian?
Well, one, of course, it's going to be a poor summarization, but I think one of the main ideas, you can make anything programmable, even if it's not code itself. So one of the example he shared that he hasn't shared before, at least I haven't seen, was being able to use computer vision on your desktop. And then you can see, okay, here is some text, here are some buttons, here is whatever. and then add another layer on top with other visuals or do something, which already in itself, I mean, sparks quite a few ideas. But it's also a good example, a bit like dynamic lens. Say, okay, you can program using code or text or this kind of text-based symbol with its syntax, but that's just one way. And you don't have to be stuck in that paradigm or in that way to do things. And maybe in a lot of cases, you don't have to limit yourself to that medium. If you can do like visual-based or computer vision-based or triggered programming, maybe that could open a lot of doors. And in particular, breaking away from, let's say, siloed applications, because I think that was one of the main benefits. Okay, this application doesn't give an API or data or JSON or anything, but I still want to be able to use it, and it's my computer. So how can I use it? So yeah, that was, I think, a pretty good illustration of that.
Fantastic, thanks. Yeah, he's a.
Hang on a
smart
second.
guy.
Hang on. There's news on Facebook that Ted died.
Oh, no.
That can't be real. I'll call him. Not that I know which number. He has too many numbers, but I'll start. Sorry.
Ted Nelson?
Yeah. Somebody. Huh? Oh. So I just. Why is he saying this is? Hey, Ted, it's Frode. Can you call me? Or... Oh. Ted, it's Frode. Can you call me or text me or email me or something? Thank you. Sorry, I just, this is very confusing. He has 3 numbers, so just second one now. How can someone just post that without a verification?
Is this on Twitter or something?
Facebook from Mark Cantor.
Your call has been forwarded to an.
Okay, one last number. Sorry. So try this one here. Okay, yeah, I don't know what's happening. Hi, Brandel. I just now I just saw a message on Facebook. Someone saying Ted Nelson has died, and that's just shocking. Because I can't verify it, and that would be awful. Right. Okay. Well, let's carry on as we are now. Where are we talking about? Oh, Brandel, your potential doing Apple VR stuff. How's that going?
So the role or the group is web experiences prototyping, and my interviews start in 90 minutes. So I'm going to drop out early today.
Yeah, I think
so
we'll
that I can
that.
So that I can do that. But that is the final step before before I get that position. And yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. We wish you all the luck. Just going to do one more search.
I don't suppose they're doing the interview in VR.
Interview sadly is over WebEx.
Well, nothing surfaced on Hacker News yet about Ted. I'd expect it to show up there very quickly if it was for real.
There's a lot of dead Ted Nelsons, but not him. Oh, God almighty. What is going on? Yeah, sorry, that just threw me for a loop. Yeah, Brandel, just earlier off the record, I was talking in more detail about something. A friend has invited me to help pitch them a government thing to do with how legal documents are API'd. And that's all very exciting, and maybe we'll do some discussion groups on that. But also I said that we need to do it from the perspective that in 10 years minimum, these will need to be accessible in really rich ways from AR type environments. So when we're looking at the metadata now, we need to keep that in mind then. So that was the unrecorded bit with more names and details anyway. The transcript from yesterday will probably take a little while. Our transcriber was also one behind. He had catastrophes befall him. His mother-in-law died, and apparently died in their house. So the wife, who is now pregnant, is having problems living there, have to move places. So he's going through hell. He's still trying to get it to us, but I don't know about when. Hang on. Hang on.
Well, you know, the recording's not going anywhere, and there are some things in life that are a bit more important, so I'm sure we can wait.
Yeah. Mark Cantor is saying he's on multiple hosts. This is very unpleasant. First we lose Doug, and now potential of sorry, this is Mark Cantor trying to come back. You know Mark Cantor, he did Macromedia, right? Very colorful character. So Alan, do you have an update for us? Haven't seen you in a while properly.
I just thought I'd try and sit in while kind of multitasking on a light bit. So I don't want to steal any oxygen from the room if there's other stuff going on. It sounds like it was a great talk on Friday.
Oh, Friday was really good. Yeah. It's really nice, the format. You know, we talked a lot before about the format of our community, and it does seem like the monthly meetings really focus discussion on a topic. So a brief conversation, then we have an hour and a half dialogue in a small group, which is really, really very pleasant. So we aim to do that. And now we need to choose who goes next. Who has suggestions? Brandel, you have a slot coming at your convenience. So you can take that out. You may be a bit busy, I don't know.
I may, yeah, but it was heartening to see that Omar make use of the time without putting together a slide deck, because it was a neat approach to being able to deliver that. I saw recently Nolan Bushnell did the same thing, and despite the fact that a lot of the people who convened the thing being confused that he didn't have slides, it was a really good time. But I think Rizwan's was the more successful for having at least some stuff to show. And so I feel like even if I don't have quite enough organized them together to be able to put a slideshow together, I can at least show some work and speak to it. But again, depending on what happens today, I may have more or less time. So I'll probably be able to tell you end of the week.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, for a larger group, a polished presentation is clearly good. But I think for a smaller group, you know, we can watch the polished presentation elsewhere, YouTube or whatever. So the opportunity for dialogue is just so good. So yeah, so you know, even if you keywords would be good.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who tunes in regularly would know the shape of a presentation for me. It would be about the way that we think being primarily sort of triggered through actions and being able to sense multiple things, ideally from multiple contexts. And by virtue of that, creating user interfaces that leverage more things like color and shape and position, particularly within virtual reality, to be able to encode for a higher degree of redundancy for information channels that you can then use to internalize and kind of stuff into your cerebellum the actions and the perceptions that you know mean certain things. Because there's such a low degree of redundancy within the context of something like Microsoft Word or Excel, not like picking on Microsoft, they just have the most visible Office product. But once you have the ability for multiple things to kind of point partially redundantly in the same way, yeah, then you can kind of move more fluidly through that space, being able to catch some cues and miss others without those resulting in catastrophic failures. The kind of hypervigilance that we require for the sort of the modern in computing context is exceptionally exhausting. So that, but longer.
Sorry, I'm just a bit thrown by this news. Dave Weiner is asking if this is verified or not. Somebody called Rains Cohen posted it.
Do you know Ted's son? I know that somebody has been helping put together copies of computer lib and shipping them and things like that. So I was wondering, and seems to have things to do with him on Twitter. The name escapes me.
There is somebody who put together the computer lib site and also set up something for some of his other books, which I only know because I've got a couple of more of his books which are sort of on their way, which I forgot about, which I did about 3 years ago, to put out into the digital ecosphere. Which reminds me, I must get back to that because I've got the Home Computer Revolution and Literary Machines digitized and in pretty good shape. And I'd like to sort of get those into an ebook. Hopefully, channeling some money to Ted should he still be around, but mainly just so it's out there for a generation of people who don't read paper, or indeed can't. The books are very expensive to buy unless you're very lucky, like Adam, who got his for $1 from the local library, who didn't know what it was. Sorry, I'm Adam Wern. I don't know if you recall. He said he had a copy, and his local library or something were getting rid of it. I think you mean.
Yeah, I found
There's a wrong post on Facebook. I'll talk to you later. So people think you are dead. Yes, I'm so happy to hear your voice. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Oh, thank God.
Driving.
I'm looking forward to a really good video from Ted saying, "I'm not dead. I'm not
Wow.
dead."
Oh, thank God.
Frode, on this day you fought back alt news. Good job. Or alt, whatever it is. So you should probably post that up and, yeah, I guess put everybody's mind at ease. That's
Now, let's
good.
just hope Ted doesn't find all of his credit cards canceled.
Yes, yes, that's the thing, isn't it? Trying to stay ahead of the digital curve as it responds to news it wasn't supposed to get.
Yeah, I found a guy who I thought perhaps might be related to him. James in the year 2030. It's nice, Jimmy Riz, because he specifically has Ted Nelson stuff at the Ted Nelson swag, and I was wondering if perhaps that was because he actually had a biological relation.
Our Saturday party was a memorial partly for my friend who died recently. I don't need more of this bullshit, so. Oh, fuck's sake. Anyway, we'll try to get Ted into some of these chats more, you know, when he's in the right mood and fired up. I think he would appreciate the company. You all know how cantankerous he can be. That was very unpleasant. Anyway, the evening will be much more pleasant now.
We need more people telling us we're all wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, being on this little kayak in Sausalito talking about his complaints is eye-opening. Right, okay, we can change the we can change the conversation now to something or other. So, well, one thing is that Adam Wern, who is for some reason no longer in the meetings, but he's active on Twitter, and I think he watches the recording, so he may very well listen to this. He's expressed interest in going outside of VR. And I don't think any of us have a problem with that, because I think the pivot in the group was that the future is 100% VR, but you may not access it all the time through VR. Sometimes you'll still use a remarkable tablet, for crying out loud. So there's nothing wrong with having discourse on different media access points, right?
Right. I mean, the future of information is just not constrained to sitting at a computer terminal, is the point that I consider to be salient. That I'd like to see, as I've mentioned, projection or some other form of instrument, sort of personal instrument, less augmentation. There's a number of sort of novel approaches within MIT Media Lab to be able to kind of create programmable matter. But I think that all of those things are sidelines to the bigger question of what information and interaction is in an environment where you aren't obliged to be instrumented in specific ways. And virtual reality is currently the least worst sort of platform mechanism for prototyping all of those potential futures, which is why I am where I am.
Indeed. Fabian.
Yeah, what was it, like 2 days ago, yesterday, I was walking around, I have my, what is it, Magnum PI shirt. So everybody makes fun of me today, you can too if you want. But it means it's sunny finally in Belgium, so I'm putting my sunglasses, and I have just like the Bose with the sound, but I also have the Vuzix Blade that make me look like Bono instead of Magnum PI. But why do I mention all this? Is because recently I've been able to, they're on Android, so and without a browser, but I've been able to put a web view into it. And with Termux, I can put the server in it, and I can refresh it, develop much faster. All this to say that I'm going to spend my this summer, I guess, with this instead. Looks more or less normal to walk around Brussels and maybe really on the beach too. I'm not sure yet. And one of the way the problem is, why do I go a bit in length, but it works. First of all, it works pretty well. I wouldn't read a book in it, but it's actually pretty high resolution. And I have the same solution for the Google Glass. But the thing is, socially speaking, it's still very weird. People don't like it, and they see that it's weird. So I'm probably going to tinker in public more with the Sunglass type than the Google Glass one. But the problem is, again, the input. So you can swipe like this. You can use your phone, but what I have played with more recently was the tap strap. I'm not very managing so well with it, but it has, you put them on your fingers like this. And I don't manage, to be honest, but you have a gesture where you can use it like so, and then you have a pointer, and then you can move around to swipe or go next forward. But anyway, you can imagine walking in the park with the sunglasses and then swiping or doing some basic gesture, but again, in the park, not behind the computer, not checking the phone, but really being like while having a walk, or I'm not sure how, I mean, it's going to be very limited form of interactions, I think, but still some way to be, yeah, I don't know, to be fair. I don't know exactly how it's going to develop, but that works today. So you don't need the phone, you don't need the laptop or anything like this. And also no voice, because again, you might want to be inconspicuous, or at least not be pointed at in every direction. So it depends a bit, but I think that, yeah, again, I'm not sure if I want to invest too much time in how to learn to use the device versus using it. But I think in terms of interacting with a computer, and maybe also even with code, like I was starting to think about block-based programming while literally strolling around. And I think that might be feasible. And I think, yeah, novel ways to interact.
I'm right. This is not me changing the subject. This is on what you were saying. I'm writing another one of my documents of, oh my God, we must do something VR, blah, blah, blah. Not the right attention is being paid. And in there, I make a few assertions. One is the change from 2D digital to VR will be as big as from analog to digital. Ooh, big words that Mark won't like. But I also say that for people to try VR now, is probably not the best idea if you want to look into the future, because VR today is so bad in terms of the onboarding that unless you have the dedication and imagination that we do, it's going to give you a really pedestrian experience. It's like getting in a Ford Model T and not understanding a Tesla. Having said that, you know, because that's my intro to writing, VR will be like this, you know, just imagination stuff. There is a section where I'm saying through our test, this is what we've learned. One of them was having lines across the room to connect things is actually really annoying. That's something you wouldn't know until you go into the room. So I'm wondering about the kind of lighter scenario that you're doing now, Fabian, and also you, Brandel. Are there things that you have learned about implementation of VR that isn't obvious? I would love to include it in the document and of course to quote you. That's the kind of stuff that really helps people understand that it's not just more monitors, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, one challenge, you know, I guess it may be the same as the onboarding is bad, but just that so few people have their eyes on information in the context of VR at this point that very little is there. So even on the web, actually, all of the experiences that people would typically point to have only a very meager dusting of information through them, and they're primarily kind of invested in these notions of presence, which I despise, in favor of any kind of idea of information processing. And one of the primary challenges with that is that the medium itself, the technical sort of implementations that people have put forward are so poorly attuned to be able to kind of pull information in. The web VR, as it currently exists, A-Frame being the least worst, doesn't have very good facility for putting words or text or linked information into it in the same way that a web page is. You know, a web page, you just type stuff, and Frode, I imagine that even you've written raw HTML before. But
Yes, even me have written HTML.
Right. And that's what the web is and should be in my mind. And right now, WebXR is not. There's no way to write like that and get information into WebXR. I suppose it would be possible for somebody with no deeper understanding of the JavaScript and the APIs and the devices and things like that to be able to do something similar in A-Frame, but I haven't seen evidence that they have, which I think is pretty strong evidence, which is a pretty strong sort of suggestion that perhaps they can't. So yeah, that's a bigger problem for me. Is not just is it frustrating to get started, but once you're actually in and au fait with the device per se, you don't really have any particular signals that information and information processing or creation can be particularly well catered to. Yeah.
Mark.
Just quickly, I just wondered, because hearing the term XR creep in there, I did wonder if, which I understand XR is also being around as a term for extended reality, as a sort of as an umbrella for AR and VR, which arguably might both be slightly tarnished AR because people are trying to use it for too much for marketing and not other things, and VR because it's rather, as Fred's alluding to, for those who've looked into it, you can see there's something there, but it probably just seems like a bit more entertainment to many at the moment. And I just wonder if XR has a similar pollution problem, or whether it might usefully be a better term to just describe what Brandel, I thought, summed up quite neatly, which is to say, well, just it's thinking of stuff not being tied to effectively a screen or a device. So it's not so much, because I think for a lot of people VR is synonymous with 3D, whatever that means, because of course there are many ways you can slice that as well, and it's much more than that, obviously. And I think the main thing I've taken from my sort of filtering steps in using the medium is to realize what it's not as much as what it is.
The way that I'm writing this piece in this document, this section, is very, very simple to try to bring things into linear stuff. I just say, because most people, as you know, have zero imagination, which is very, very odd. So I say, imagine you're in the space you're right now, except you can put screens anywhere. So just start doing this and then explaining whether it's AR, XR, VR, whatever, it doesn't matter. Even VR very soon will be able to scan the room and make it the same if you want it to be. But there are so many exciting things we can add to this down the line. And I think that if all of us publish in different ways some amazingness, we can really help this come alive. Because at the end of this piece, and the reason I'll be sending it out is to say, okay, hold on a second, who's going to own this? So WebXR obviously is a really, really important thing, but I talk about how Apple is going to destroy VR. And what I say is, well, sorry, I don't think I mentioned, the premise of this piece is, the headline is something like VR will not exist much longer. Meaning, once it's in common usage, people won't use that term. Just like we don't talk about hypertext anymore, right? So it'll just be, you put on your Apple or Meta or Google goggles. It won't be a fancy academic technological thing like we talk about now, right? But it's really, really easy for me as an Apple fanboy to say, you use this and this Apple device and this technology and it'll work together. That'll be great for Apple because I'm sure they'll do some of that. But of course, that means that you're more and more in their ecosystem, obviously. So I think we're all on very much the same page here, that we need to help educate people that once you're in VR, every single pixel, everything you see is someone's intellectual property, and someone has decided how it functions and all of that good stuff.
Well, before you get to the IP thing, is also just to see these things as ideas that traverse brand barriers. Some people will build faster because there is work to be done to get these things to the point where large numbers of people can use them, and I think we've touched on that. But I'm reflecting on the sort of points you're raising. I think it's that thing of staying away, sort of trying to school oneself out of thinking it in terms of brand X or brand Y, because that's not what's really important.
No, but it is. It is what's important, unfortunately, because when you buy Apple's VR headset, you're going to have universal copy. You're going to have universal control. You're going to be able to use your headphones for anything. That's why I mean it's important. It's not something we want to be important, but they are going to do everything they can to make it important for you.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But what I mean is in terms of communicating it to a wider audience, to the people in this room will understand what you mean by that and the need to use these sort of integrated things. But I'm just conscious that it's sort of just reminding oneself to think slightly on a broader plane than that, because none of these things are set, and you look at companies that seem rock solid today and they haven't been there forever, and enormous companies have gone away as well. So in a sense, what lives on are the ideas, and I don't think that in any way, shape or form detracts from what people are actually doing. And so it's not to mean that the effort they put in and the IP that they've generated is in some way meaningless or misappropriated. It's just thinking of it, keeping it on the wider canvas, because I think makes it perhaps easier for a larger number of people to consume, because they don't have to do it. They don't first of all have to sort of dig into the brand identities to understand what's going on.
Fabian, and then Alan.
Yeah, I was going to give an off-the-record example, but instead I'm going to give a very short life story. When I was maybe 10 years old or so, I had a little helicopter. Or actually, I didn't have it, but I saw it as an ad, and it was going to have like missile launcher and really fly and all. And then I was so hyped, so excited by it. And then my grandma finally bought it. And then I had to make, and I had to carry it and all this. And I was, okay, maybe I was not 10, but 5, I don't know. But I was young enough to be like convinced that this mini helicopter would actually fly through missiles and all this. And why I give this as an example is I've been a WebXR or VR advocate for a bit, and I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, because then I create some hype. If I do it right, let's say, and then people are like I was with my little helicopter as a kid, are disappointed, and I think it's already amazing as it is. This or VR or what, any of those headsets or even set of technologies are really interesting, have real potential. But now I tend to be a lot more. This is how it is, and it's not perfect, and it has this and that flaws. But I tend to be a lot less. I would say selling promises and say this is how it is. I don't know if this can be used here or there, but a lot less on the sales pitch kind of thing, because in the end, I think if people are creative or curious or want to build things, they're going to find ways to use it, and we don't have to. I think it's not creating disappointment is usually, I find it more productive than getting hype that goes down rather quickly. That's been my experience.
Alan, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's a slightly different topic, but maybe it's a coordination point. And if anything, it might sort of explain my excitement about VR, and also kind of like how I maybe am trying to make sense of it, or what I can do to move it along. There's a great documentary, a PBS documentary. I believe it's on Amazon Prime now, and you may have already seen it or have. This is probably all old information, but great documentary on Edison. And what's great about it is that seeing his whole life all at once in like the course of an hour, it becomes pretty obvious that the first big invention of his, the phonograph, was a different kind of invention than the later one of the light bulb. You know, Alexander Graham Bell comes on the telephone, and then Edison goes, wait, what if we could record sound? And it blew everybody's mind. It was super popular, but it was also just tinfoil and a rotor. You know, it was the simplest invention, and anti-fragile, right? As opposed to a later invention, had the same kind of, you know, flashlight of a light bulb go off, and he figured out, okay, I know how to make a light bulb, right? And he had figured out the theories and the workingness. He was correct around how to figure out how to make electric light. And yet it took years and years and years for it to actually come out, you know, way longer than he thought. He thought it was going to take 2 weeks, and he had the core idea correct. Figuring out the filament took a while, but what took more time was what he didn't realize is that in order to get the light bulb out there, he needed to create an entire infrastructure, an electric grid that could support the light bulb. So it's a different genre of invention. The first one lived on its own. You could just buy this little thing and turn it, and now you have a recorded voice. The other one, he basically had to invent the cloud in order to bring light into homes. Now, rich people wanted light in their homes sooner, and so he almost created like servers, right? We're gonna have a generator in your own backyard so you can have light in your house, but he didn't like that solution. He wanted to power blocks at a time. And there's something so, to me, that was so exciting about that. We tend to think of all inventions as being, you know, once you have it, it's there. It's just a matter of getting used to it. But I think there are definitely different kinds of inventions, and I see VR as being closer to the light bulb type, which there had been previous attempts at light bulbs for maybe 50 years or more, of the incandescent bulb, etc. And there were always these little problems with it. And even when he cracked the case of how to get the light bulb to work, there was still all this extra he had to drag along with it. So that is the metaphor that we bring to the table.
Yeah, well, yeah, and electric light more generally, electric illumination. San Jose was one of the cities that invested in electric moonlight. If you've ever seen or heard about the great big
lights.
arc lights, they were in Detroit as well. So that they had, you know, had aspirations to illuminate the city as though it was daylight 24 hours a day, with these great searing sort of lights that would be sort of comparably blinding to people as the sun, if looking straight at it. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of malevolence and fun to be had in designing sort of the worldview that flows from different approaches in that way. Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree that the reality is that for immersive computing to work, there's so much about the infrastructure and environment, the context in which we understand information to exist, and what are reasonable terms of engagement with it, that need to be pulled along with it. You know, and like I said, one of my greatest concerns with the web, which I think is the natural home of information at this point, is that it is not married up very well in terms of what information is and what immersive computing is. And so what I want to look at is what are the primitives of the web that are successful in that regard. And so there are other things like I actually think sound is an unmitigated failure on the web as well. I think if you look at things like the web audio API, people like me, I don't know if you've seen my fun, silly keyboard, I can use it, but no one else has been able to integrate it well. And I think it's because the web is at its best when it's primarily declarative, and when people can kind of creatively sort of make things be enriched by small bits and pieces that they can cobble from here and there. And for all of the, you know, the penchant of modern web developers to be able to pull in enormous stacks of libraries and things like that, I still think that minimal, a creative sort of approach to engineering and design is going to be the more successful one, where you just crib a couple of lines from somewhere and you get some kind of new capability. And I think that, you know, if elected, my goal will be to make sure that we take a look at both sort of the size of API surfaces and the uptake of them, and see if there are any commonalities with regard to how that works. And to your point, like invent the cloud or invent the infrastructure, the way those things kind of get to people, because right now there are phenomenal capabilities in the web, but most people don't even use Canvas, let alone WebGL, let alone WebXR, for the very reason that they don't have anything to do with the web as it typically stands. And so there's a vast, in my estimation, actually widening gulf between people who can Canvas and WebGL and people who are just putting divs around. And that's not to denigrate the people doing the divs, because that's what Google and you know, Google Docs and Wikipedia all are, and those are by far, I think, the more important parts of the web than my ability to be able to throw a couple of cubes around.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad that you that didn't sound like a crazy metaphor. Another thought along with that was the documentary touches on this too, but gaslight, of course, before we had electric light, was very popular in homes, even though it poisoned people and asphyxiated people, and it was incredibly lethal and dangerous. And that made me think of, well, that's like the internet, you know, like, even though it's incredibly dangerous right now, we're still just like, well, we have to connect. Sorry, Mark,
Right.
Go ahead.
Actually, no, I saw the reason that's in my hand. I was just interesting, just sort of listening, Brandon, I'm talking about, you know, the sort of things like people not using Canvas and things. And I thought that really struck me this week. I just wanted to do, I knew what I needed to make, a simple bit of SVG. But could I find a tool that was simple enough to do the simple task? No, I could find something that was the sort of size of Illustrator or something, which would cost me lots of money I don't want to spend and would take me more time than I have to learn. But something that allowed me, so it's this constant technical problem, something that allows you to start by saying, what I'm trying to do is this. And that was what I found so captivating in Omar's sort of little demo. The thing I immediately saw was, oh, right, I can find all the blue things, and they're now blue things. And I don't really need to know why they're blue things. I don't even know how they're defined. I don't care. I just want to know that all the blue things are now blue things, and I can do stuff to blue things that I can't do to green things. And I think that's wonderful. And you know, in a sense, we sort of need more of that, because I think that's what shuts a lot of people out. And it doesn't devalue in any way, shape, or form all the work of all the very expert people who are making these things, who devoted a lot of time and energy to learning how to do it, in a sense, stand the whole thing up. Because to even get to the point where we can have these cleverer tools, actually someone's got to build those tools. So I get all that bit, but a sort of missing bit at the moment is the thing where you don't need that degree of technical thing. Fred's hand matching now, I think. I shall pass
No, it's just such a bizarre thing. No, I'm not trying to shut you up.
No. I think I've run my course.
Yeah, I mean, there is a thing about the market that is completely insane for how this is built. It's still a little bit wild west, and you basically have to be massive robber baron, so to speak, or a cowboy who can do everything. The amount of money that I spent on Author with programming, because I represent more kind of the user side, or whatever you want to call it, it's going to take a long time to pay that back. So when we're talking about inventing things, and we're talking about building infrastructures, like building that cloud, there are many kinds of infrastructures. There's the infrastructure for how you sell the darn thing. Edison had to make an electric network, and there was gas networks, all these things that happen. It happens when there is a kind of a clear market need. So that's all very important, and also quite frightening. And I think Peter's work on redefining what universities are is important in this regard, for sure. And with respect with Fabienne and Brandel, because you make a lot of these things, you may I mean, Fabian, you were very kind in the way on Twitter. We talked about how I need to learn to program so I can teach Edgar, and I appreciate that, and we should look into that. In fact, that could be maybe one of our chief topics, because I know what I don't understand. I don't know the unknowns, obviously, but I know, for instance, this whole thing about when you start coding, you have to write at the top of the screen in the correct way what libraries to use. That could be point and click. There's got to be some kind of stuff that can be training wheels.
And in practice there are, but yeah, that's why I would start with JavaScript, because you can get so much done, because all of that is implied in the web browser. You have a relatively substantial standard library related to what the divs are and what style is and things like that. Unfortunately, like I said, WebGL doesn't have that, and so it's horrible. I was brushing up on how to write WebGL from scratch last night, and it's just, I don't know how much you've done that, Fabian, but it's disgusting. It's so stupid.
I made a triangle with colors.
Yeah. No, I've done similar. This guy was my minimal harness to get just a little bit more than a triangle happening. And what's fun, because this is 4 kilobytes and it runs on your watch, but it's horrible. It's literally like the least you can write to get something like this happening, and it's just so stupid.
It looks cool though.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm proud of what I've achieved.
Do you have a feel for why it's so horrible? I mean, I'm not asking to sort of, to disparage a particular person, but do you have a sense of why it's like that?
So,
good question.
WebGL is based on OpenGL ES 2.1, which is based on OpenGL, which was the people's best guess at what would be a reasonable sort of control library for how to do graphics starting in the early 1990s. And so it has the paradigms of that sort of stage of thinking, both of professionalism and of what would be an appropriate way of kind of managing those things. So, it's pretty frequently the case that the sort of elite cabal of computer programmers and not least the graphics programmers believe that there are necessities with regard to things like matrix algebra and single instruction multiple data. All of these kinds of things need to be understood as absolute table stakes in order to make sure that they can do graphics, and so they bake those things in. And so Canvas was Canvas 2D, which is bad enough, was introduced in between 03 and 08, in large part by Apple, but also by Mozilla, people wanting to create the ability to generate graphics on the web, similar to how Flash had been successful in the past. And so it's based on OK paradigms. If you've ever written Canvas 2D, you have pens and you move them around with strokes and fills and things like that. WebGL was bolted onto Canvas 2D. So it's a new, you get a canvas and you say, instead of using Context 2D, you used WebGL. And it was the graphics engineers at Mozilla and Chrome and Apple who do actually have to write that low-level graphic stuff, the very same stuff that you need in DirectX or OpenGL at that time, now Metal. And those are still really hostile in context, but that they won't for the life of them admit just how hostile they are. And so they said, well, these are really great capabilities, so let's pipe them through so that we can do what we need to for safety and security, cross-device security and things like that. But it's better for people to have these graphical capabilities than to try to faff around figuring out the most appropriate and friendly way to expose them. And so that's what they did, and that's why WebGL is so hostile. You have to create buffers, and they have GL uniform buff 3F, and then you pass in not an array, but a buffer created from it, like a typed array from an array. And yeah, so it's gross. And that's why so few people write raw
It
GL.
has an echo to me of when I sort of first encountered the web, and I thought it was would it be what about 93, 90, 94? I was just beginning to tinker with stuff, and obviously had no technical background at all. And what I quickly worked out that, you know, basically HTML was for losers who didn't understand SGML, you know, because really, if you're doing it properly, and it seems to be the same paradigm. And I do get and I do respect the engineering thought and structure that goes behind it, but it seems that same thing, that what the story sort of lacks is the unreasonable person in the room saying, I know and I don't care, I just want one of these. Can you stop telling me? Can you stop telling me about things I'm not interested in? Just go do it. I suppose, you know, that's what's missing, isn't it? And that was, I guess, was Steve Jobs' role in many ways, and some of the things he did.
Yeah, and there needs to be a sort of a Steve Jobsification of some of the sort of the developer technical details as well. It's like, what if I didn't care about any of those things, and I still wanted to be able to do this anyway? And yeah, so my hope is that we can take a look at those sort of APIs and approaches and say, are there ways we can, alternative ways that we can sort of approach the metaphors and the principles that are requisite for doing those things, and make it so that we can just expect more people to kind of get in and get some value from it. Because yeah, it's not just the difficulty, but the discontinuity as well, the metaphorical discontinuity between those places that drives the rift and means that that nobody reaches across for anything unless they're absolute diehards, at which point they've kind of they become increasingly invested in that, whether they like it or not. I feel like the tendency for people to protect their elite status is something that you know, comes up time and again in colonial studies, but I think applies just as much to technical disciplines as well.
Peter?
Well, I think that it might be worthwhile for us to think about designing a language for you and your son and other people not coming from the programming background. The fundamental problem with most programming language design is that the designers are themselves programmers. Therefore, they design the interface to the programming language to minimize their additional delta of a learning curve to move from the languages that they're already using to the new language. So again, you have this legacy running back to the 1970s of notation styles. Also, there was some interesting work done at the MIT AI lab back in the early days called the Programmer's Apprentice Project. And the idea there was basically that you'd have a background agent watching the source code as it was being edited and looking for patterns. And if it saw patterns that matched a set of standard things that it already knew about it, it might suggest, you know, are you trying to write a loop to process everything in a collection of data? And then offer to fill in a blueprint sketch of code that would achieve that effect once it realized that was what you were trying to achieve. So you'd have ideally a back and forth between the system and the user. And we could draw on current chatbot technology so that you could start asking questions. I think what would help a novice programmer the most is if you could interrogate the system as you're going about the system's understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, so that you could make sure that your mental model and the mental model of the programming language stayed in sync as closely as possible. That's about all I can think of right now. And my mom's ready for me to drive her to the ophthalmologist. So I'm going to have to bow out now. To be continued.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Have a great day, guys. See you on Friday.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Peter. One of the things that I find so striking is that the little windows that pop up in front of your main application that are sometimes they're called modals because it's a mode, but other times they're referred to as dialog boxes, and I find that such an insult because like It would be lovely if it was a dialogue. It would be lovely if there was some form of discussion or mechanism for mutual sense making. And you sort of, if you think about computer systems as agentive, then I think there are pitfalls with that. But I think that if you recognize the amount of mutual modeling that occurs in the context of a conversation, then that's a pretty interesting aspiration to reach for.
I'm sharing my screen here because scene.has collision border equals true. You know that normal people don't speak like that, right? And I'm not saying that you guys should change what programming is, but for me to have let ball equals add ball, for some reason we must have brackets here. Then after that, start ball with ball in the brackets. That kind of thinking is just completely bafflingly alien to me. And you know, we have all these discussions of the machines and systems should try to conform to the human and back and forth. Of course, there has to be some symbiosis to go, you know, all the way back to that language. And there is some help here at the bottom of the screen with what it could be there. But then you go further down, you have these quite useful icons. You know, so if it's enclosed in these, it's a function and so on. But I just think, yes, it would be interesting to do an exercise of how much of this can we hide? How much of this isn't necessary? You know, like we talked about last time, http://www, all of that isn't necessary. It's kind of early convention. Do we really, it's not rhetorical, it's a real question to you guys. Like this example here on Apple's website, does all of this need to be there?
I mean, it's no different than math and formal logic. I mean, it comes from that school, right? Like, I feel like people who trained in that would have had a great time programming, like Bertrand Russell, Wittgenstein. But yeah, agreed. Maybe GPT-3, or it seems like Codex, GPT-3, these kinds of things would be ideal for a new kind of coding.
But it is a language, in fairness. I mean, as someone who's not trained in them, has had to sort of, you know, stumble my way through it. It's only after a long time I've come to see that, some of those things that appear sort of like redundancies or rather baroque things are sort of there for a purpose. And the thing that I feel cheated on is no one ever explained that meta language without making me sit down and learn to code first. I think it's asked about, face about. A lot of the things that you've just mentioned are, I think, they're quite broad parameters. They turn up all over the place, and they're not a property of one particular language. They are, they may be rather alien, but you know, to me at the moment, reading Cyrillic is alien, but I can learn it.
Okay, but Mark, that's fine. But I mean, a nice example here, just to go back to Alan's point. Sorry, just take one at a time. That book again is because you mentioned logic. And you know, he goes through the history of logic and points out logic is designed not to unearth truth, but to convince other minds. Right? That I'm not saying that is the ultimate meaning in the world, right?
Yeah.
But it is about intention for these types of things. And I think this book is so basic, but I think it's really useful to hold a few things because it's so easy to go past them. So one thing that I would actually really like personally, and I'm wondering if this is a wider thing too, is I'd like to download and install Xcode again. I may have it, can't remember. Anyway, and put in author, the project for author in there. And then learn kind of like Xcode for project managers or something. Because Xcode seems to be pretty cleverly laid out and useful. So if I can learn enough to go in there and change the background to gray or whatever it might be, that's hugely useful because a lot of programmers charge a lot because they have to, because it takes time, right? They don't have any choice. If you charge $50 an hour, you charge $50 an hour. If you're changing the background color or making something amazing, it's not your problem. But I have looked up a little bit on the interwebs, programming, sorry, for project managers, and there isn't, you know, I can't see any useful guides. So what I'm saying is, instead of trying to change what programming is, just figure out where we can meet in the middle of something. I don't know. What do you think?
Rails was a great innovation in that approach, but that's a topic for another time.
Do you want to? No, you can elaborate on that if you don't
There's a
mind.
couple of hands up, but I mean, I'll say it quickly then. When Rails was invented, which is a framework on top of Ruby, it was a series of abstractions and a workflow. I think the philosophy was sort of like opinionated first, right? You could always overturn the opinions, but here's the opinions. And it led to, the invention of Twitter for one, because it made it such that people who were amateur or loosely experienced in programming to not at all, build an application. And it was really enjoyable for that. So that's another thing to try out, even though it's not necessarily relevant to today's concerns. It's still a great way to make something.
Thank you. Oh yeah, you're leaving, Brando. Good luck.
Good luck. Break a leg. Break a virtual leg.
Update us on Twitter if you don't mind. We'll be thinking about you.
See everybody.
Bye. Oh, that's going to be exciting. Yeah, I think you're actually next, Mark, and then Fabian.
Yep. So briefly, 'cause it's interesting how these things all interrelate, because I was thinking, as you were sharing the screen now, you say, well, why does it need this? And I was thinking, it's almost like, I can imagine the people who sat down to write Apple scripts, and I know there are other people who've done similar. And one of the things we learn is that our way of declaring things is somewhat ambiguous, which is why no wonder machines have a problem understanding effectively our written or spoken word, be it in English or whatever. Because there are sort of things that the human brain does that we don't yet understand, that magically make sense of something that a more hard-edged program can't. And if I understand correctly, one of the aims originally of AppleScript was that you write down what you want. You just say, I want a thing this big, and it would go do that. Of course, that didn't come to pass. And Apple have been trying to kill off AppleScript for as long as I think I've been involved in computers, without success, because it works, because it's got embedded in print, actually. I think it's probably the fair reason it survived. And there's too much money for them to turn it off. But I get your point. Because I have the same confusion. I'm definitely, I'm unashamedly from certainly the untrained side of sort of technical understanding of coding. But it's interesting your point about stuff for program managers. And I think back to when I was actually commissioning software back in the 90s, when I knew even less about it. And the thing I found really hard was just trying to get anyone to have a sensible sort of meeting halfway, that conversation on the bridge. Because I'd say to them, look, it's not that I'm disinterested in what you do, but I don't understand half of what you're telling me. Just crack out a few metaphors, sort of meet me halfway, because I'm not asking you to do unreasonable things. But if you can't, it's that kind of thing. If you keep saying you have a problem, but you can't explain what the problem is, then it's very difficult to help manage people out of that. So so this lack of bridging language, I think, is quite an issue, and I'll stop there.
What do you mean by if you can't explain what the problem is in this context?
So in my naivety, I'd say, well, I want a feature to do that, and someone said that that's going to be really difficult, and I said, okay, fine, I accept that, but can you explain why it's going to be really difficult, rather than just say it's going to take all the time or all the money we don't have, because that's sort of a non-answer. And people would sort of sit and go, well, and then they dive into sort of talking about C++ or something, which is fine, but at which point, obviously, I rather struggle to keep up. And it wasn't because they were being difficult. They weren't trying to sort of dazzle me with stuff I didn't understand. It's just that they didn't, and it was interesting, their training didn't encourage them or didn't offer them the affordances to be able to explain the problems. And as time went on, I learned a lot more. I just accepted I had to go more than halfway, and again, that didn't bother me at all. It was just, it took an awful long time to even sort of get a hand scrabble start to understand, so that I could be a better partner in the process, so I could ask better questions, and asked less stupid ones, because I actually had a better understanding of the implications of some of what I was asking for. At least to know that, you know, I might be asking something that was really difficult, but I knew I wanted it, and I was prepared to accept that it came with a difficulty and a cost, rather than just saying, oh, you know what, can we have that in green, and we want this over there, and which is the way the management interface with a lot of skilled work tends to happen. And it's very sad, because it's tremendously inefficient and creates a lot of angst. Does that help?
Yeah, except for the very, very last second there. Just to get back to you on that, having, you know, I'm a graphic designer by trade. And I have seen, especially friends who are freelancers, sitting, having clients saying, could you move that green dot 2 centimeters to the left? You know, and that's because that's just not what they know. It may seem like a joke, but you know, we do have to talk to different specialists in different ways for different things. Yeah, Fabian?
I think it's entirely dependent on your or anyone else who wants to learn programming motivation, because I personally think it's the act of programming is horrible. It's really it's unpleasant. Like it really nearly never ever works the way it should be, or it's supposed to do. And then when it does, you're like, what? There must be a bug somewhere down there, and I'm going to hit it like in 6 months at the most inopportune moment. And yet I don't think there are very few things that are as interesting as this. But unlike, for example, pure mathematics, you can apply it right away. Like you can actually, I mean, it's silly, but and you don't see it because there is too much light, but I wrote code that changes the light bulb, not the actual light bulb, but turn it on and off. And it's a silly example, and yet it is like, it has impact right away. And yesterday I shouldn't, because it was Sunday, it's the weekend, and still I couldn't help myself. I wrote a little piece of code that deploys some codes on as many servers as I want. Like it provisions servers to say, hey, I want to buy or rent those servers, and I can run whatever on it. So what I'm trying to say is, it has this, I think it's honestly, in my opinion, I don't know of anything like this at the intersection of both potency, like it can have impact, and yet so abstract. Because, for example, you can do physics and learn physics and have a theory of everything, but if you don't have like a collider at home, which I don't have, and we always need like bigger ones, harder, more complex hardware. Here, like you can really take the cheapest desktop, laptop, whatever, and can have a ridiculous impact, and still like being super abstract, like trying to model even like the meaning of life. Like there is no limitation of the kind of topics you can explore. And I personally see programming and the languages you can use for it as tool down that path, either of trying to get how the world is running through simulations, through anything, but really as tools down that progression of intersection of abstraction, yet I don't want to say power, but potency, or being to have an impact back on the world. So, but it's very different than I want to use it for, I don't know, a very limited goal. Because in that sense, if it's just, for example, to delegate to someone else rather than try to learn from it, build with it, like for a while, over and over again, then I think delegating is better. And yes, you might get a hint here or there on how to delegate better by having the basis, but I think it's really it's a start, but I think it's not the most interesting way to go with it.
Well, Alan, yeah, you got a drop. Well, thanks for coming by. Look forward to seeing you on Friday, hopefully, or when you can.
Thanks. All right. See you all.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah.
In terms of running simulations, yesterday Edgar was pushing a child toy car in front of him around the garden at high speed. You know, that's a simulation too. I think that, and I don't think you would disagree. I'm not, I'm just saying that just like we're hoping to build virtual environments where you can move things around, you have the rules of physics and you can change them. So there are many ways to build environments and use environments to find out different types of things. I mean, I used to do modding of Doom to build new rooms, and there were scripts and stuff. You could say it's very simple, but in terms of the perception of the user coming through those things, it was, wow, that's scary. Oh, it's so involving, and so on. So I think we have to be careful that we agree that for those who are able to write code is an amazing thing. But I think we also need to be quite clear that not everybody can. And, I'm 54 now, 54 and 2 weeks. I think I can finally say that there are some things that I can do that a lot of other people can't do. You could call it soft skills. Like often when I take pictures, people say, I have an eye, right? That comes from training. I've taken probably 1 million pictures, I used to roll my own film, but I can't code. And just because now we're living in kind of a post-MTV generation of Revenge of the Nerds, it now seems it's swung to the way that if you can't code, you aren't cool, man. There are so many. I don't think that's what you're saying strongly, Fabian, at all. But I just think that we need to really keep our minds open for how can we have different means where technology can help people express not just passive things, but also to make, for lack of a better word, interactive things. Do you remember GoLive, which became part of, which was bought by Adobe? GoLive to make web pages was absolutely phenomenal. One thing you could do easily was to make image maps through just drawing on images, and you would assign a link and it would work. And that became, because this has to deal with people's professions, became all kinds of other stuff. And now there is no software. You can easily make an image map, put an image on a web page, and have people click on pages. It's become difficult because a lot of people didn't want to do it. And those people who did want to do it, they don't mind the extra complexity. It's part of their workflow anyway. There doesn't seem to be a natural progression to make flexibility more democratic. Power, of course, to an extent, but not necessarily flexibility.
I mean, the thing is, the difficult point about this thing of we swing one way or the other, we should all do this or should all do that, is I'm old enough to know, as long as my ass points downwards, there are just some things I'm never going to master. I mean, not for lack of trying, but at best I'll be rubbish at them. I'm not going to be the next winner of the lawn tennis championships or something, even if I practiced all day every day. And I'm much happier feeling comfortable in that, respecting those who have a skill that I will never acquire, respect it for what it is, which is why I find now I'm much more interested and invested in looking in sort of the bridging metaphors, the bridging terms that allow people who are really good at something to continue to do something they're really good at, and in a way that actually enables all, because it provides greater reach. People can have more meaningful conversations, and they become less sort of contractual. Less hard edged. I think anything that pushes in that direction is good. I actually tell you, I've got to drop. So it's a wedding anniversary and I have things to do. So it's lovely to see you all. I'll leave you two guys to finish up. But great to see you, Fabian. Bye, Fred.
Good evening. Congratulations, Mark.
Well, then we can do programming.
I'm sure that I could do programming in really small batches. That's something I would like. I would like to be able to have a little window where I learn, like maybe even a simple little script. So there are so many different kind of approaches to this, and it's an interesting issue, of course.
But I think every time you say simple, it triggers me a bit, in the sense that and you mentioned, for example, Doom or some levels for Doom or something like this. It's the kind of like vision that only the page, for example, that our dear speaker showed when he started his talk on Friday, that's code, but there is a lot more than that, and it doesn't have to be looking like this at all, and simple is relative to yourself at a moment in time, for others too. So I think that it's the link I shared earlier about was it like structure, one of the classical books for programming. It's probably one of the worst way, and let's say supporting someone else to learn programming might be a way, like you say, the programming, let's say for manager or for managing someone who would, whatever the entry point is. But I think really the and it sounds, I don't know if it's gatekeeping in programming, but I remember a talk in Greece in 2015 I saw on the imposter syndrome. Most programmers, including people who are paid for it, don't consider themselves programmers. Like, that's their job, and they write pages and pages day after day, and maybe they've done doing that for 10 years, 20 years. Anybody who looks behind the shoulder will say, oh, well, you're a programmer. And yet, so I'm wondering how much for everyone, even, I don't know, like figures in the programming world, let's say, I don't know, yeah, anybody, they would potentially compare themselves to someone else who come to a conference or whatnot, and not feel good about it. So I think as long as it's a desire to grow and learn together, then I think it's fine. If it's a fear of being not as good as someone else, I don't think it's productive, because yeah, there is always be a better programmer, I guess, in a way. But yeah, as long as it's useful to you, either because you make something productive out of it, or you just learn something by doing it, or you just have fun doing it, I think it's worth it.
It sounds a little bit like you're saying, if you're going to learn programming, you might as well learn it properly. Is that correct?
Yes, but properly doesn't have to mean it's entirely depending on your goal. Like, it can be literally, for example, I don't use Photoshop, but there is a program called GIMP, which is an open source equivalent, let's say, and you can write scripts in GIMP so that you can scale or apply any kind of modifications to your image. And that might be harder, but it might actually be more exciting or interesting for you than some, I don't know, changing parts of text, or something that, let's say, that would be blog based, and you would find it not as interesting because it would have more impact for you.
Well, I mean, I do know how to use Photoshop to a very high degree. So I have looked at other software because I think Adobe is a really annoying company. But it comes down to the integration and work.
Can you script? I don't know. Can you script in Photoshop?
Yeah, you can do batch. You basically watch me and then do it, and then that can be modified later.
So that's one entry point. But it watches, like, you click through stuff, or at some point there is some variables or some text or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what would be really useful in my case would be to understand Xcode a little bit, so that when I'm asking my programmer to do basic stuff, I can just go in and do it myself. And I'm talking basic, a lot of it is actually changing layouts. And I believe that best element.
When you mentioned it actually earlier, I was thinking well, I don't know Xcode, but I think that's indeed maybe the best way, in the sense that your motivation there is clear, and you can have an impact like right away. But it means you need to find somebody who is both good at it, but also good at explaining it or communicating or helping you see how it's done or understand. And I don't know if yeah, that would be, let's say, the challenge. Maybe that's already the case now, and that would be great.
It sounds good. I think if you are okay, we finish a bit early today.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was going to be squeezed on this side, but now I think I can relax a little bit. Yeah, I'll keep thinking about what you're saying. I know there is something there, and one of the things that's holding me back is this thing with different mentalities. I look at different people, and very few people are good at everything. And I'm just wondering, in some cases, being good at one thing precludes something else, but in most cases, it shouldn't have to. So that's why I'm very willing to listen to what you have to say.
I mean, in the end, we still have to make choices about how we spend our time. But in this case, I'm relatively confident. I mean, from my own experience, it's both practical and fun. So I think the risk there is like not high, depend on your goal and expectation. If you want to be like the best programmer ever, and yeah, maybe that's going to be tricky. But yeah, just before we go, a little quote that from Alan Perlis, that a programming language that doesn't change the way you think is not worth learning. It's really, it's not whatever you produce with it is interesting, but you can still use that even without the computer. Like when Brendel mentioned, like, oh, walking around and then doing things away from the computer, that's also the kind of positive impact.
I like that quote, but I think it can be extended to any language you learn. But of course, computing is another level on top of that. So that's
and even if you're, let's say, just interested in linguistic, in the aspect that is syntax and all that, grammar, I mean, it is fascinating, even if you never hit the compile key just for this, and see also how it's, what are the parallels with natural languages, maybe help to learn natural languages, also worth it. But I have to warn that it's an endless quest. You can start, but you can never finish.
indeed. All right, thanks very much for today. I look forward to Friday, and wonder how things are going with Brendel. It'll be interesting to learn. All right,
Fingers crossed.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.